To discuss, we want to bring in John Sitilides, a geopolitical strategist with Trilogy Advisors.
John, so journalists are really not allowed to get inside this country, and yet the New York Times reported that they were under the auspices of the government. And despite this narrative that the government is trying to portray that the refugees, the Rohingya, are allowed to come back, New York Times reported that that is not the case. What do you think? What is the government trying to do?
It's trying to maximize any type of a public relations advantage it can, while making sure that as few Rohingya members of the minority are able to re-enter the country. This is going to be a very deliberate policy of keeping as many of the 700,000 refugees in Bangladesh, and some of them are in India, about 40,000 in India, and seeing to it that a minority that, very sadly, in 2018, is essentially loathed by the extremist, Buddhist, very nationalist majority in Burma, in Myanmar, not only are not able to return to their homes, but their homes are being given to Myanmar citizens. So the Rohingya are being stripped of national identity, of their properties. It's not going to be a welcome home for them anytime soon.
Talk about the issue of accountability here, though, John, and whether or not there's even a remote chance, I suppose, at citizenship.
Well, for the most part, the Rohingya have suffered a second-class citizenship in Burma over the decades. And you have a very strong military component, even with the so-called restoration to democracy several years ago with Aung San Suu Kyi now as the leader of the civilian government, a very powerful military. She's backing that military. That military is backed by the Colossus in China and in India. And so Burma's got a lot of wiggle room here to conduct the kind of policies domestically it chooses to. And this is a problem that goes back decades. Not only for the Muslim Rohingya, but now increasingly potentially for the Christian minority in Burma as well. And it's simply not a country that we understand from a Western perspective. It's a very different culture. The Buddhist nationalists there are being abetted by nationalist extremist monks. And it's just a very bizarre story for most Westerners to try to comprehend. But there's not going to be any type of a Western flourishing of respect for minority rights in Burma for the foreseeable future.
John, the UK took over the presidency of the Security Council for the month of August, and I attended the press conference, and their ambassador said that the Rohingya issue is very high on the agenda there this month. But what is the international community really doing to help solve this crisis, if there is any solution?
Well, this is where we're reminded that international community is a beautiful phrase that's essentially meaningless when it comes to actual power politics. So the United States, our European allies, what I again would call the Western community of nations, is very much concerned about what has been a horrific record of executions, of mass rapes, of absolute brutality against hundreds of thousands of this Rohingya minority, half of whom are children that are caught up in these horrific camps, these refugee camps in India and in Bangladesh. But the real problem is that China sits on the UN Security Council. And so China can block any resolution that condemns in any serious or strong critical terms the Burma government. And China has seen fit to do that in the past. And I think that Burma is looking to China to do that again in the future, especially because China has a major oil pipeline that runs through Burma to the Indian Ocean, and it bypasses a very strained Malacca Straits in Southeast Asia. So this is a very geostrategic country for China. And for that matter, there's billions, perhaps tens of billions of projects that China is looking to construct in Burma under its One Belt, One Road initiative. And India, which is not on the Security Council, but also has significant diplomatic weight in South Asia, is also a country that wants the best relations with the Burmese government. So we won't be looking for much assistance, especially from China, but neither from India, in the UN or anywhere else, in trying to advance a human rights story in this horrific situation.
All right, John Sitilides, we thank you for your time.